I'll never forget the last peaceful moment of my life. The pine trees, the morning coffee, that feeling of calm. I was sitting on my cabin porch with State Attorney General Morrison, going over a $2 million environmental grant proposal over breakfast. It was supposed to be one of those quiet mornings where the world slows down, you know? Calm, serene, everything in its place. Then came a sound. Diesel engines roaring, gravel crunching beneath heavy tires, and then slam. A black Escalade pulled right into my driveway. Out steps this woman who looked like she ate small children for breakfast. Designer heels clicking up my wooden steps. I didn't even have time to process what was going on when she shoved the camera in my face, all while Morrison, literally sitting next to me, looked on in disbelief. "This illegal structure is condemned," she says, loud enough for both of us to hear. "I'm Brenda Castellanos, HOA president, and you're done." Morrison nearly chokes on his coffee. He turns to her, confused. "Excuse me, ma'am?" I didn't wait for her to answer. "Someone," I said, watching her lackeys photograph my solar panels as if they were evidence in a crime scene, "just made the biggest mistake of her life." Brenda had no idea what she was walking into. She had no idea that she was declaring war on a guy who happened to be having breakfast with the most powerful prosecutor in the state. You're probably wondering how I ended up in a situation where an HOA president was trying to tear down my life in front of a government official. Well, let me back up and explain. My name's Garrett Reynolds. I'm 52 years old, retired electrical engineer. Spent 30 years designing smart grids for municipalities all over the state. I made my money selling patents for technology that powers your homes, the kind of stuff that keeps the lights on for entire towns. So I decided I'd earned the right to disappear into the mountains. The cabin I inherited from my grandfather, a mining engineer who bought 40 acres in Cascade Valley back when Calvin Coolidge was president, was perfect for me to live out the rest of my life in peace. But when I inherited this place 3 years ago, it came with something far more valuable than the land. It came with the promise Sarah, my late wife, made to me on her deathbed. 2 years ago, Sarah passed away from cancer. Before the morphine stole her voice, she grabbed my hand, gripped it with surprising strength, and whispered, "Promise me. Turn this valley into something beautiful. Show the kids what we're fighting to save." Those words haunted me every day after she was gone. The smell of antiseptic and dying flowers in that hospital room, still vivid, still there. And keeping that promise, well, that's what got me out of bed every morning. So I started converting the old mining buildings on the land into classrooms. I installed solar panels that gleamed like mirrors against the ancient pine trees. My goal was to make this place a sanctuary where city kids could learn that nature isn't just a screensaver. It was while I was discussing my federal grant application with Morrison, on my porch, bacon and eggs cooking on the wood-burning stove, that the peace I'd fought so hard for shattered. The moment that black Escalade arrived, I could feel everything change. Diesel exhaust rolled into the mountain air, smothering the smell of wood smoke and coffee. The moment Brenda stepped out of that car, heels clicking against my grandfather's hand-laid stone steps, I knew. I knew that this wasn't just some petty attack. It was an all-out assault on my life, my dreams, and most importantly, Sarah's dream. Her declaration wasn't just an attack on a few solar panels. It was an attack on everything I was trying to build here. "This illegal operation is shut down," she said, smug, with no regard for what I was doing or who I was working with. "I'm Brenda Castellanos, president of Cascade Valley Estates HOA, and this environmental camp ends right now." I watched Morrison's face change. 1 second, he's just a friendly government official discussing grants. The next, he's the federal prosecutor witnessing someone commit civil rights violations in real time. He slipped me a recording device. "Document everything," he whispered, standing up. "I'll be in touch." Brenda thought she'd won. She probably figured she had the upper hand, kicking us out with just a wave of her hand. But what she didn't know was that she'd just messed with the wrong guy. And she didn't know that she just threatened a federal grant recipient, not to mention someone with ties to the most powerful prosecutor in the state. After Morrison drove off, Brenda shoved some papers into my hands. $15,000 in compliance fees, she said, and I want every solar panel removed within 30 days. Compliance with what? I asked. Community aesthetic standards, she replied, not even blinking. Then she started photographing my solar installation like she was documenting war crimes. I couldn't help but laugh. A property that predates her precious HOA by nearly 8 decades. And she was telling me I needed to take down solar panels? My grandfather bought this land when her luxury development was nothing but a twinkle in some con artist's eye. But you know what? It wasn't just about aesthetics. No, I could see through that thin veneer. This was about power. It was about someone who thought they could bulldoze anything or anyone that didn't fit into their vision of suburban perfection. I felt my blood start to boil, and my anger wasn't just for the solar panels. It was for the memory of Sarah, for her wish, and for the dream we'd fought so hard to keep alive. The next morning, after I'd sent Morrison off with his encrypted messages, that familiar diesel rumble returned. But this time, it wasn't Brenda's Escalade. It was a county inspection truck that sounded like it was running on broken dreams. And out steps Dale Kruger, clipboard clutched like a shield. Got complaints about your electrical system, he says, his voice already strained before he's even reached my porch. I look past him, and there it is, Brenda's black SUV lurking at the tree line like a vulture. Dale says my off-grid solar system allegedly violates county codes. Who filed these complaints? I ask, already knowing the answer. Mrs. Castellanos filed formal paperwork, he says. I could tell he was nervous. He was sweating under the cool mountain air. She's offering serious money to make it all go away. There was the bribe, the money, the desperation. This wasn't about regulations. This wasn't about safety. This was about silencing me and getting me out of the way so she could push forward with her agenda. Dale, I said, sitting back on my porch and calmly sipping my coffee. Do you know who wrote the county's electrical inspection protocols? He blinked, sweat forming on his forehead. No, I did, I said, pulling out the documentation from the 1998 guidelines. Every safety standard, every protocol, every measure, all stamped and certified with my signature. His face drained of color. He didn't know who he was dealing with. The look on his face was priceless. I designed those codes, Dale. Want to see the original documentation? The sweat on his brow wasn't from the cool air anymore. It was from the sudden realization that he had no idea who he was messing with. Within the hour, Morrison texted me. Kruger's inspection history was under federal review. Turns out, Kruger had a history of fraudulent red tags across 3 counties, all connected to development projects. I didn't have to say anything more. Brenda had made a grave mistake, and the wheels were already in motion. That evening, my neighbor Magnus Olson stopped by with a mason jar of moonshine that probably had enough alcohol to fuel a small aircraft. He'd been around long enough to know trouble when he saw it. When he mentioned Brenda had been sniffing around his property too, photographing his well house and measuring distances, I knew it was only a matter of time before she would escalate again. Magnus and I spent the night going through his father's survey maps, original documents from 1887. And that's when everything clicked. Those old survey maps weren't just maps. They were the key to everything. They were the proof we needed to expose the corruption. They showed the boundaries, the water rights, and the federal land designations Brenda was trying to bulldoze over. And they also revealed something else, a stolen piece of history. I spent hours that night calculating, plotting, and planning. I knew that this fight was just beginning, but the next morning, I was ready. I wasn't just fighting for solar panels anymore. I was fighting for the truth. And sometimes the truth is the deadliest weapon of all. The war had just begun.